Hi, this is Andre. We're going to look at a way of taking a line of melodic phrases and slicing up those phrases so that each one has its own dedicated loop. So you can take one continuous line and chop it up so that different fragments of that line are assigned to different loops, all while you're recording the initial loops and all while you're playing the line. So starting off, let's look at the relevant parameter settings we're using. More loops is set to 8. We have 8 separate loops. Auto record is on. Loop copy is off, switch quantize is off, and to begin with, sampler style is set to start. That means that starting with the loop number 1, when we hit the loop number 1 MIDI button, it's going to start recording. We're then going to step through loops 2 through 8 using their corresponding MIDI buttons, and when we hit the button for the next loop, two things happen. One is we jump into that loop and start recording in there. The other thing that happens is that we immediately stop recording the loop in the previous loop that we are leaving. So selecting a new loop number in the middle of recording a loop does two things. It starts recording in that new target loop, and it also stops recording in the loop that we are about to leave. So this is stepping our way through all 8 loops one after the other in one single pass. And now we're ending recording loop 8 with the loop 1 button, and since we already have a loop in loop 1, we don't start recording, we jump back to what's in loop 1. So now we've filled up all 8 of the loop spaces with content, all in a single pass. And because we have sampler style set to start, that means that each time we jump to a loop, we replay it from the beginning. So each time you enter a target loop, it replays from the same start point of that loop. So up until now, all of our switching between loops has been done by using MIDI buttons that are assigned to each loop separately. So we have particular MIDI buttons for each loop, and if we want to go straight to that loop, we just hit the MIDI button that's dedicated to that loop number. Now we're going to use next loop to change loops, and that is going to scroll us sequentially through the loops in ascending order one at a time. You will notice in a few spots that I hit the next loop button and it actually skips over 1 or 2 loops, that it will jump from loop 1 to loop 3 or loop 4, for instance. I would love to say that's a really, really meticulously cultivated technique that I've spent years developing, but the truth is just that my Behringer foot pedal is a little buggy. I've had it for 14 years. I can literally hear things rattling around in it when I move it, and I think this particular pedal board is just getting to the end of its natural lifespan. So this is not a deliberate thing. This is just a bit of a technical issue with my particular unit. And you'll notice that if we let a loop play to the endpoint, it will start repeating again. So if we stop pressing next loop, then the loop that we end on is going to keep looping. That's an important distinction because in a little bit we're going to be changing the sampler style setting to get a very, very different kind of effect. So now we've just changed sampler style to 1. It was at start and it's now set to 1. That means that when it's set to 1, it will play the loop once and then it will mute. So it's basically a one-shot kind of effect. When you enter a new loop, it will play that new loop one time and then it will go into a mute mode. It also has another secret power that we're going to get into in a little bit, but the one-shot playback is the main characteristic of sampler style being 1. So now we're going to have some fun. We're at loop 8 right now. We're going to use next loop to jump into loop 1. And after loop 1 finishes playing, look at what happens. So after the one-shot playback of loop 1, it then goes back to loop 8. It goes back to the loop that we started from. I'm going to use a direct MIDI button to access loop 1, and then I'm going to use the next loop button to access additional loops above loop 1. And you'll see that as each one finishes its one-shot playback, we then go one loop back, do a one-shot playback of that one, and then keep working our way backwards until we get to the loop that we started from. In this particular case, that was loop 1. And this is deliberate behavior. When I was making this video at first, I thought I had discovered this really cool bug. I eventually remembered that not only was this something that is an actual deliberate feature, but it's something I actually touched on in a previous video at some point over the last 3 years. So this automatic backwards scrolling thing is very much on purpose, and it happens specifically when you have sampler style set to 1 and you use next loop. If you use the direct MIDI buttons for different loop numbers, it will stay on that loop. It will do the one-shot playback and then mute. But if you use next loop, then it will go back however many loops you next loop through, and then it will come to the loop you started that from, and then it will go into one-shot playback for that. And as we mentioned before, you can see that there's a little bit of bugginess in this particular MIDI foot switch that I'm using. So we jump from loop 1 to loop 8 pretty darn quickly. But you'll see as we work our way backwards, it's going to go through each loop from 8 back to 1, one step at a time. Each one plays back one time and it then switches to the one right behind it in line. And as you can see here, you can use next loop on the physical front panel as well as a MIDI command to get that backwards scrolling effect happening. So whether you're accessing next loop via MIDI or through the front panel or through the old school physical resistor-based foot pedal, the effect will be the same. As long as you're using next loop and sampler style is set to 1, then you will get that backwards scrolling effect. So what I'm doing now is switching to a different bank that does a lot of changing of speed and direction forward or backwards and re-triggering. And I switched here because I wanted to see if I could change the direction or the playback speed of a loop while it was in cue. In other words, while it was being played back its one time before going to the next loop behind it in line, I wanted to see if I could effectively change the direction and or the playback speed of the loop. And I could. And the reason some of these loops are now taking a long time to start playing is because they've both been reversed and they've been put to half speed. So that means they're going to take twice as long to play, and if they're in reverse, then you're going to get the end of the note fading in. If you reverse the loop, then instead of starting with the note that you played and having it fade out, it's going to fade in from the end of the loop. So that, combined with the fact that speed has been brought down to half their normal rate, means that for some of these loops, if you access them directly, then you get this very slow, very gradual fade in. This is the latest in a series of recent videos looking at finding ways of getting loop material happening very quickly and very seamlessly. And this particular approach is something that, once again, I've known about for many years. I've had a general idea about it, but I've never really gotten around to rolling up my sleeves and figuring out how I could make it work for myself. So this video for me is literally just scratching the surface of this stuff. As with the previous videos along these lines, I'm hoping that as I become more fluent with this stuff and find better ways of integrating it into my musical flow, that I'll come up with more ideas with it. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.